The ministry of truth, or Minitrue, is the ministry of propaganda. As with the other ministries in the novel, the name Ministry of Truth is a misnomer because in reality it serves the opposite. It is responsible for the necessary falsification of historical events. However, like the other ministries, the name is also apt because it decides what the truth is in Oceania. As well as administrating truth, the ministry spreads a new language amongst the populace called Newspeak, in which, for example, truth is understood to mean statements like 2 plus 2 equals 5, when the situation warrants. In keeping with the concept of doublethink, the ministry is thus aptly named in that it manufactures truth in the Newspeak sense of the word. The book describes the doctoring of historical records to show a government-approved version of events. And folks, that is the Ministry of Truth from 1984. And this is all minus one. Welcome. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Go here to my locals. Go to the Rumbles. Go to the Subscribe Star if you're so inclined to help my family out and help finance me. Go to PeerTube over there as well. And I have another baby, another project that I've been doing just about as long. It's a live show called The Ends Justify the Memes. You can find us on DLive and YouTube. We go live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. On occasion, we break from that schedule. Sometimes we stream on Saturdays. This week, our friend, Don, from Plebeian Media, or better known now as he is rebranded, Don the Pleb, will be on once again. And we'll be talking about news and some of the training I did in the past week and whatever else we decide to talk about as two Marines get together and do what we do. In any case, folks, today I really wanted to talk to you about the media and the realities of the media and the dangers of a government-run media. This should be obvious to anyone who is a truth seeker and who understands the atrocities of the government and the power in which they tend to consolidate and use against the people. This is the Online Journalism Review, and this is an article from 2009. American government. It's always been subsidized commercial media. It's always subsidized commercial media. Excuse me. Now, this has a greater 20-page PDF to it you can find. This is from the Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism. This is from the University of Southern California. And of course, this whole paper is lined here. You can find in a PDF form, but I'm just going to read a little bit from this excerpt. And we're going to talk about this in depth. If you aren't aware of this, again, I don't always go out in the weeds. If you want to go to the deep weeds, go watch the Corbett Report with James Corbett or someone like that, or Jay Dyer or one of those folks. Of course, we can always go back to our friend Alex Jones and his entertaining method of disseminating truth. But guys, I'm here to give you the basics, and I'm here to point things for you to find for yourselves. I'm not here to completely educate you, but as I always say, I like to teach people how to fish. I can't hold your hand all the time, but I can say, here's where you can find this information. And in doing so, I make you a more competent and responsible person. Because if I don't do that, basically, you're just waiting for your information to come from me. And that doesn't work well. And in fact, that's the problem we have with media today. That's the problem we have with the boomers, if you would, who are stuck on corporate media like Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and the rest. It could be CBS. It could be ABC. Look, folks, they're all highly subsidized. Facebook, as well as Twitter and Google, are all subsidized by the government. This is not a good thing. This is a bad thing. This is the centralization and consolidation of power. And once these folks have power, guess what? They begin to prop each other up so they maintain their power. And they tend to push on the little guy to keep them from rising to power. So let's start. This is a mythology about the relationship between American government and the new business. Let's bigify this, make it bigly. A mythology about the relationship between American government and the news business is, again, making the rounds, and it needs a corrective jolt. The myth is that the commercial press in this country stands wholly independent of governmental subsistence. Here's the jolt. There's never been a time in U.S. history when government dollars weren't propping up the news business. This year, federal, state, and local governments will spend well over $1 billion to support commercial news publishers through tax breaks, postal subsidies, and the printing of public notices. And the amount used is much higher. This topic is back in the news because of the rapid economic decline of newspapers and news magazines and many broadcast outlets. This, my friends, was over a decade ago. This was in 2009. I believe the PDF that this is actually taken from was 2008. Let me see if I can get that up real quick. This says 2010. Okay, the full study was done then. I'm assuming these authors wrote this article prior to releasing their study. So we hear about this now all of the time, that folks like myself who are presenting media, new media, independent media, are outpacing the corporate media. What do we see? Well, we see then YouTube, which is no longer YouTube, it is CorpoTube. We see them downgrading independent voices, and we see them upgrading people who are known to be fake news, like the New York Times saying that a Washington, D.C. officer was killed by Trump supporters. This was completely fake news. Some of us who are aware, who watch a lot of media coverage and who pay attention, knew that the story didn't line up right from the beginning. Now they've retracted it and said, no, that didn't happen, and the guy died of a heart attack later. This is the stuff I'm talking about, folks, and they do it all the time. Hunter Biden, PBS said they weren't even going to bother covering the Hunter Biden scandal. Wasn't worth their time. After the election, all of a sudden, Hunter Biden's in the news. Folks, understand, as I always tell you, what is really going on. It is the NGOs, the bankers, it is the global elitists, it is the Chinese system which we are going toward. And they will be, I promise you, the new world power within a decade or so. Probably sooner. Let's see here. It says, amid deepening concerns about the impact of our democracy, someone calling on the government to get involved. Leonard Downey and Michael Skudson were among the latest, urging limited government aid and support the cause of news and information. The Federal Trade Commission is among the federal agencies wading in, scheduling discussions December 1st through 2nd to gauge whether government intervention is needed. Why would the government be involved with the free press? See, the press isn't free if it is under the coercion of government. And again, we've been doing this for a long time. We did this back in the First World War, the Second World War. Of course, there was a ton of propaganda. The media was a little bit more diligent in those days, especially when it came to things like eventually Korea and Vietnam. But I think, especially with the Vietnam War, it was more toward a globalist Marxist agenda why they brought up the things that they did. Again, speculation on my part, but it just seems to be the way. By the way, folks, a really good, if you want to look at the history of war in the United States and from a sort of lefty perspective, but not too off the rails, go watch... what is it? The Untold History of the United States. I believe that's what it's called, by Oliver Stone. It's something of that sort. It's a documentary series. Very, very favorable to the government. Stone makes good points. It's a good perspective. I think that some of what he takes, if I'm not mistaken, is from Howard Zinn, which is Zinn is just an agitprop. It's complete communist nonsense as far as the history of America, but that's what lefties like. In any case, it shows sort of the battle and the merger of these two things. The problem is Stone takes a perspective that FDR was trying to keep the corporations in balance, and he was trying to do this and that, and he's not seeing that the corporations were actually already infiltrated into the government, and the folks within the government were already basically like, sure, come on in. Yeah, I like the power. Read some of the memoirs of Woodrow Wilson, for instance, who signed into law the Federal Reserve Act and the federal taxation after the amendment was passed, of course. See what these folks were talking about. Read FDR's, trying to think. My Misguided Father-in-Law or something like that. It's a book about one of FDR, if I'm not mistaken, one of his son-in-laws and the things that he saw happening then with businessmen and influence. There is nothing going to be any different, folks, until we get these things separated, and really it's probably just never going to happen because it's how we decide to run modern governments. It's how we're trying to dictate policy today. The World Economic Forum is, of course, doing this very thing. Stakeholder capitalism. Well, that means everybody who has a dollar who buys. Well, that's just free market capitalism, folks. This is the Newspeak. It's not that at all. It's not that at all. What it is those who own corporate shares and those who are in government, they dictate everything and you'll get the scraps. In any case, again, let's keep going. The truth is that the American government and the news business have always been joined at the hip, and not just through the government copyright protections, restrictions, and anti-competitive practices and regulations of public airwaves. It's also through the infusion of tax dollars. The Postal Service subsidy of mailing costs from newspapers and magazines, which date back to the colonial America and the Postal Act of 1792, is often raised as Exhibit A. Less well known is just how large this subsidy was and how much it has shrunk. As recently as the late 1960s, the government was forgiving roughly 3/4 of print publications periodically mailing expenses. And then, suddenly it's Trump's fault that the post office is going bankrupt. No. It's been a problem for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. Very long time. And the reason why is because they're inefficient, it's unionized, and it's government. Therefore, it's wasteful. They have no incentive to be better. It says at a cost of about $400 million annually, or adjusted for inflation, about $2 billion today. Much of that disappeared with the Postal Recognition Act of 1970 and subsequent cutbacks. But the post office still discounts the postage cost of periodicals about $270 million a year. Now, of course, that's huge for those companies. But now we're in the full-on digital age, and this being written in 2009 is the same crisis and same problem, which is also why there's more fake news because of the clickbait. But there's also more propaganda news because of the folks that own the institutions. Think of all the former FBI and CIA agents that were on CNN as analysts talking about the evils of the Trump administration and how he was going to jail and everything else. Meanwhile, on the left, they're propping up in the news QAnon, which anyone with any sense realizes is a complete LARP or a psyop from the left. And guys, you can believe in Q all you want. Look, I have one measure of a prophet, and that's do their predictions come right? That's straight out of the Bible. I make educated guesses. As far as I know, pretty much everything I've predicted so far since I've been doing this little channel has come true. Maybe I've made a mistake here or there. That happens. But QAnon's got nothing right, guys. Nothing. And the media is focusing on that, like these QAnon people are horrible and blah, blah, blah. You don't need Q to look into the things that Q talks about. But what I will say is It's nothing like the stuff that comes out of CNN or MSNBC. That is 1,000 times more propagandistic, 1,000 times more fake news. Really is. And the same with the New York Times. And you guys have to understand, of course, they editorialize. They use certain framing devices. They part of their editorialism is just cutting out, certain facts. Just how it works. Postal subsidies, though, are just the start of the story. Federal and state governments forego about $890 million a year on income and state tax breaks to the newspaper industry, most of it at the state level. The actual figure is probably much higher because many states don't report tax expenditure details. That'd be, pretty nice for me if I didn't have to pay certain taxes just for doing this. I don't really make any money. I don't make any money at all. I don't think I've made a dime doing this yet. But but if I get a tax break for my wife who's making all the money right now, well, that'd be great. Because I consider this my calling, my job, or at least part of what I need to do. Another major form of government support comes through public notice requirement, which also have their roots in colonial America. These laws require cities, counties, and school districts, along with the state and federal agencies, to buy advertising space in newspapers to disclose a range of government actions. Meaning, hey, the one ads, they're required to take out ads in the one ads. But all three of these categories are shrinking. For example, legislation has been introduced in 40 states to move public notice to the web, and the Department of Justice has already announced it will shift forfeiture notices from newspapers to its own website. Well, that makes some sense to my mind, although the sites may be more expensive in the end. The impact would be another blow to newspapers, especially small ones. In 2000, the National Newspaper Association estimated that public notice billing accounted for 5 to 10% of newspaper revenue. It's a pretty sizable chunk, really. Considering I don't know what corporations get taxed at currently, but I think it was, under Trump, dropped down to 20% or so. But considering like personally taxed without adding all kinds of the other taxes, like when I go get gas or sales tax or whatever else, alcohol, if I, vice taxes, whatever it may be, just straight payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, all that stuff. You're talking 27% out of the average person's paycheck. And I mean, I'm talking about this from a guy that was working part-time at FedEx while I was going to school a few years back to, make some extra money or try and get my bills paid, and making $200 a paycheck. That's a lot of money when you double that. That's almost $60. That's a lot of money when you make $200 every 2 weeks or every week or whatever it was I was making. It says postal subsidies, tax breaks, and public notice requirements only begin to describe the ways governments at every level have supported the American news industry. Municipalities provide newspapers with enormous sales and market benefits by allowing vendor boxes on public sidewalks at little or no cost to the newspaper. Drug Administration's advertising regulations for Food and Drug Administration have been the boon to magazine publishers because they require TV ads to be accompanied by more specific disclosures. Magazines are one of the approved outlets. And again, all this print's going away. Keeps going away. It's a waste of paper. People just go online, right? People turn on folks like me to tell you stuff because I'm a media junkie. I'm taking in hours and hours and hours of this all day long. I'm working around the house, doing stuff, making dinner. Guess what I got on in the background? I got on the YouTubes and independent content creators, and then later on I'll go and get on my little cyborg machine on my phone, and I sit there and I look up and I'll read the articles and I'll be like, oh, yeah, sure enough. Because I fact check who I listen to, which is why I listen to them, because I trust them. Right? I fact check them. Sometimes they get it wrong in their opinion, but they don't present me the wrong information. After backing the news industry for more than 200 years, the government should assess how it can be most helpful now, when the future of news and information is uncertain. I disagree completely. I think the government has no business telling the newspapers, anything. Now, if they did the same treatment for any business, I'd be fine with that. But they should not be subsidizing in any way, shape, or form. It should be folks like me or others with bigger channels, like Tim Pool, for instance, presenting news, Stick, Sex, and Hammer, presenting news, the dozens and dozens of creators out there, and making money on basically donations. Well, Tim takes corporate money. I really never intend on doing that here on YouTube. Maybe on Rumble, if there's any revenue stream there, I'll do that because they seem to be free speech oriented. But if what I am doing and talking about ever succeeds monetarily for me, it will be in a donation way. It will be because you folks decide that what I am presenting to you is worthy of a price. And one of my favorite bands is Radiohead. And years ago, to get away from the internet stuff, knowing that people rip stuff and people are going to be able to find it on the internet, they put their music out and you could buy it online for a penny or any price you wanted to give them. That's the future, folks. Instead of the prices being set, instead of someone dictating it to you from above, you get to decide. That is what a free market represents. And you decide the value of an item, depending on how much it's worth to you. Now, me personally, I bought that album. That was the In Rainbows album several years ago, about a decade ago that came out. I bought that at the bookstore. So I paid like $14 or something like that. I was fine with that. I liked the band. That was my way to support them. And folks want to do this all the time. They want to protect themselves. The media is doing that now. What do you think all this independent fact checker stuff is about? That are totally wrong, constantly, all the time. Second, the government should help promote innovation, as it did when the Department of Defense funded the research that created the internet, or when NASA funded the creation of satellites that make cable television, direct TV possible. No, actually, the government shouldn't fund innovation. I want the government out of the economy completely. Our problems are because the government does this stuff. Our problems are that the government is far more socialistic than it ever was intended to be. And people think that more socialism is going to solve the problem. No, it's just going to enhance the corruption, folks. Third, for commercial media, government-supported mechanisms that are content neutral, such as copyright protections, postal subsidies, and taxes, are preferable to those that can call upon the government to fund specific news outlets. Blah, 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 blah. Anyways, let's keep moving, guys. You kind of get the gist. Old article, but it's telling you this is how it works. This is from the New York Times. It says a reminder of precedents in subsidizing newspapers. This was from 2010. American newspapers have relied on government subsidies since Washington's day, but that support has dropped sharply in the last 4 decades, according to a report to be released Thursday by the University of Southern California. Now, I just read that to you. I'm not going to go through this article, but again, the lefties go, well, no, we have to prop up these things via the government. Look, if the community wants to get together and create a newspaper and they want to pool their money together and volunteer to do that, as I just spoke of, in support, then that is a good thing. Otherwise, not such a good thing. So here, let's get out of here. This is Springer Link. Here we have media subsidies, editorial independence compromised. And this is an older study as well, but not quite as older article as well. So the abstract reads, in September 2014, the recently established Swiss Federal Media Commission trailed its first report reflecting on policy measures supporting Swiss media. But it was not welcome. The report innocently suggests financially supporting national news agencies, innovation in the media sector, and outstanding journalistic projects. While some journalistic organizations agree that the general claim that the media needed support the representatives of the large publishing companies indignantly rejected any supportive action by the Swiss government as undue intervention into the press and media freedom. Media policy, it turned out once again, is a thorny policy field, even if the purpose is, as in the Swiss case, to provide support for the media. Again, though, do you want your government to dictate, hey, you, newspaper guy, hey, if you don't write the story, I'll give you a little bit of extra money. Hey, if you write this story, I promise I'll cut you off from that money. How is this applied? Is it applied fairly? Why would you take a centralized authority and decide that they're going to tell you the truth? I like it here. The Minitrue. Oh yeah, it's the Minitrue. I mean, Orwell had despite his socialistic leanings, he had a great mind and to see the corruption of these things. The Minitrue. It's just sort of a little bit true. Folks, we know that the CIA has always had ties to the media. Again, why do you think certain individuals were in the media talking against Trump, the deep state? The reason why journalists need to be propped up by the government is because they're horrible. Project Veritas doesn't have a problem funding itself. And I have some inside scoop on that. They have no problem funding themselves. People want to donate to them. I can tell you that anyone who's providing a service that is worthwhile, some folks will, by all means, enjoy freely, and that's fine. But there will be generous folks out there who will pay for it, and they will pay for it for the very reason of understanding that it's a valuable service. It's pretty simple, guys. What we're asking here in this study is media subsidies, editorial independence compromised? Yeah. In the end, that's what will happen. We see this with the BBC. Here from iea.org.uk. How government subsidies to the media undermine editorial independence. This was August 2019. Media pluralism in Europe is under threat, far from exhibiting a rich diversity of opinions, content, ownership, and structures. Europe's media sectors face considerable and rising risk to market competition and editorial independence. Ooh, market competition. You know what that means, folks? If people compete against you, they might be better than you, and you might not have a job anymore. That might not be your calling. You might need to do something else. It's like, it's kind of simple, guys. It's, I'm not the best basketball player. Being a short guy, I'm not dunking on anybody. Now there were guys like Muggsy Bogues and I can't think of other folks though back in the day that were phenomenal, smaller than I am. It happens. Not me though. Not me. Guess what? Not playing in the NBA for a reason. Many journalists shouldn't be playing in the journalism game. In fact, they're activists. And by the way, folks, I don't pretend to be a journalism. This is, of course, everything I do here is activism. It's activism from my perspective. I think I bring a different perspective than a lot of people are talking about. Do I echo what some people are talking about? Absolutely. How many people, though, do you listen to out there that are mixing these things with classical liberal ideas, with masculinity and manship and leadership and all that stuff, with Christianity, with 1st through 3rd century, that is like the ante-Nicene fathers, the early church fathers before the corruption from the Roman government, before Neoplatonicism entered and crept into the church, before Augustine and his heresies, and Make no mistakes. It's heretical, guys, as well as the papacy. And I know, like, one of my big fans here is a Catholic. I mean, my wife grew up Catholic. We know Catholics. Not against Catholics, folks. They're good Catholic Christians. Just against the papacy. I have my reasons. My point is who's talking to you about all that? There might be other people, but I have a very specific niche, right? And again, you guys watching me growing slowly as I've been doing this, is a testament to me getting better, as well as people out there that actually enjoy this. If the government subsidizes the media, it has nothing to do with who enjoys it and who doesn't. It's literally what you're being told by the government, by the propaganda. So it says, so concluded in 2017 annual report of the Center for Media Pluralism and Media Freedom. That almost threw me off there. Although I used to use European spellings like that. I like that a lot better, especially theater. Anyways. A research center co-financed by the European Union. It says, no surprise then that the industry heavyweights and regulators worry for the future of the sector. In late June of 2019, at the event hosted by the Euract IV, however you pronounce that, speakers called for subsidies to media outlets, or in the words of Ricardo Gutierrez, Secretary of European Federation for Journalists, a Marshall Plan for the press. Doesn't stop, guys. Marshall Plan. We all recall what that was. That was America rebuilding Europe after the Second World War. This was the beginning, in part, of globalism. See, what they're really saying is we need a global media that all agrees with each other and can fact check, and then anyone who says any dissenting opinion, they'll be wrong and outcast. The wrong thing cannot be heard. We can't allow competition because competition, that might allow bad ideas. It's not like good ideas would outplace and outpace the bad ideas. It's not like that would ever happen. It's not like there aren't certain economic universal laws in which we live under. No. No, we must protect you. We must protect you for your own good. The rationale is that by providing subsidies, the European Union can encourage new entrants and small players to compete against the powerful incumbents. Yeah, that's not going to happen. The small players grow by being allowed to grow. Does anyone know like Five Guys or Mission Barbecue? Both great, fast food places. Or Chipotle. That'd be another one I can think of off the top of my head. How old are they? How did they grow? How long did it take for them to grow to be all around the world? Do you think McDonald's subsidized otherwise? Do you think McDonald's said, no, we can't let them compete. We have to put all these restrictions here and there. No, they were able to be in an actual fair market. And that is why they grew. That is why they became a thing. It's no different with information. While introducing voters to different ideas, highlights conflicting opinions, and encouraging debate between them, a media plural Europe would better facilitate democratic decision-making, especially in the era of fake news. Media plural, I would agree with that statement, but that's not what we're talking about. Era of fake news? Come on, guys. Fake news has always existed. This is this is like Orwellian newspeak language to convince you that the lies that come out of the corporate propaganda media are true. But while no one would question the benefits of media plural Europe, Europeans should worry that instead of encouraging media pluralism, any selective subsidy, that is, a payment to chosen media outlets, will only exacerbate the industry's problems at the taxpayer's expense. Selective subsidies threaten the editorial independence of the media. And I could go on and on. Go find this article if you want to read it. How the government subsidies to the media undermine editorial independence. The reason why I won't continue with this is because he's just going to bring up the points I brought up. Here from Pointer, we have a government fund to help journalism. That wouldn't corrupt journalism. Okay? The debate about whether to fund local media needs to move beyond the theoretical to the practical. This was July 2nd, 2020. In the midst of the coof. There's a funny, quirky argument over whether the government should directly subsidize journalism. Let me biglify this for both you and myself. Because that's as good as we're going to get. Well, the government should directly subsidize journalism to prove their opposing positions. Both sides invoke the founding fathers and the sexy concept of postal subsidies. The folks arguing that there should be government support for journalism say, let's stop being naive about this. The government has been subsidizing the media for ages. First article I read you. Look at how the founding fathers gave lower postal rates to newspapers to encourage a free press. Those arguing against massive government intervention argue that most ideals for government help would corrupt journalism because they involve government officials dangling funds over journalists, like our beloved postal subsidies. Excuse me, guys. Well, let's think about this. The government provides money to universities, to non-private colleges, right? State colleges get funds from the government. What have the state colleges done? Well, they've indoctrinated children for several generations, or young men and women. They've ill-prepared them for society. And we have dumbed down our grades K through 12 so that the bachelor's degree is now the new high school diploma. And in many cases, businesses don't even care if you have a degree or not because they care about what you can do. So certain things like critical race theory, President Trump banned within the federal government because it was being subsidized and then was turned around by President Biden, right? So are we going to go from administration to administration with these things, with these ideas that are being spread? I have a better thing. Let us compete. Let us just use the natural system. Good ideas went out over bad ideas. So I've had this argument with Don the Pleb on my show briefly. He mentioned it. I'll probably bring it up again with him tomorrow on the show. But the idea is that good ideas went out over bad ideas. And he said, well, if that was true, wouldn't communism be gone? Maybe. But the reality is that the course of history has always been directed over who controls the ideas. This is the problem with church and state, by the way, folks. It's no different. State and media, state and economy. The state has one function. That is to protect your liberty, to keep you safe. Any other function is a misstep and always leads to tyranny. And I know there's some lefty out there going, maybe, who has listened this long going, Bill, you're an idiot. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't take you seriously because you obviously have never read history. You obviously have no understanding of the very basics of economics. You have no philosophical grounding, and you have no clue how the human mind works. Because I take those points right there, and on top of that, I'll raise you one. My relationship with God. They all inform me the same. And while you spout out theories of how men will be moral, I will tell you the truth about them. Power corrupts, and it takes a strong man not to be corrupted, and few men are so strong. It says, so it is time to ask, what was so great about the postal subsidies? What could be the modern day equivalent approach, blah, blah, blah. The founder did indeed decide to have founders, that is, have a lower postal cost for newspapers, significant cost to the government. First, it was mostly content neutral. It lowered the postal fees for all newspapers, both scrupulously, well, I guess that was supposed to be Jeffersonian rags and the fomenting Federalist newspapers alike. Second, it was formulaic based on distance, not merit. It didn't involve the presidentially appointed postmaster general. Plenty of irresponsible papers were helped. The founding generation agreed that for the greater good of the free press, everyone would tolerate that some newspapers they hated would still get subsidized. Right. See, even with the subsidies, that's a free market. You know who doesn't live in a free market right now? Aside from everyone, really, because we're under a central bank. Farmers. There are multi-million-dollar farming corporations that have been subsidized since the 1930s. Multi-million profit making. And the small farmers are declining. Guess what the one of the 10 planks of communism is? Well, it's to centralize all farming and agriculture into the hands of the government. Been doing that one for a while. And, you probably know about Monsanto, right? And GMOs and all that good stuff. Guys, it is so pervasive. It's in every industry. Every industry. Again, I'm not going to continue with this because for the sake of time, you can read it for yourself. I just want you to know where you can find stuff. Here, this article was just released. Oh, no. This originally was 2018, but when I read this, it said 5 days ago. But anyways, from FEE, it says why it's time to end government-funded media. So this says this was October 2nd, 2018. And you all can go and read this for yourself. You can look at the things. By the way, public broadcasting, go watch one of the founders of that what was about a year ago, on Dave Rubin, and looking at the corruption and leftism that have come out. Same with NPR. NPR is, by the way, a private industry, but they are highly subsidized by the government. So be aware of that. And this is no different than what happens with social media. So with all that, let's get to this real quick. Constantine the Great and Christianity. This is just a little wiki article. During the reign of the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, Christianity began to transition to the dominant religion of Rome, mostly for political reasons. Historians remain uncertain about Constantine's reasons for favoring Christianity. Theologians and historians have often argued about which form of early Christianity was subscribed to. There is no consensus among scholars as to whether he adopted his mother's Christianity in his youth, or as claimed by Eusebius, who is the early church historian, encouraged her to convert to faith he himself adopted. And it goes on and talks about Solus Invictus, the imperial sun cult of the day, and his conversion to Christianity. And this goes on to talk about basically his influence over Christianity. Constantine's decision to cease the persecution of the Christians in the Roman Empire was a turning point for the early Christians, sometimes referring to as the triumph of the church, the peace of the church, and a Constantinian shift. In 313, Constantine and Licentius issued the Edict of Milan, decriminalizing Christian worship. The emperor became a great patron of the church and set a precedent for the position of Christian emperor within the church, and raised the notions of orthodoxy, Christendom, ecumenical councils, and state church of the Roman Empire declared by the Edict of 380. He is revered as a saint and so forth. And we can go through this whole thing, talk about his conversion. Of course, the great battle where he saw a vision of the sun and a cross. Different accounts on all this. But more importantly, what I want to talk about is the Edict of Thessalonica. Thessalonica, guys, that is where we get Thessalonians from in the Bible, the letter that Paul wrote to the Thessalonians. Says issued on the 27th of February. Oh, we're coming up on an anniversary here. It says 380 by three reigning Roman emperors made Nicene Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. Notice it says Nicene. By the way, folks, the Council of Nicaea had nothing to do with the canonization of the scripture. Just completely false. That's like Dan Brown nonsense. You've been told ahistorical, didn't exist. The church had its own scriptures in every single church because every single church was independent. And some churches, such as in the Ethiopic church, the Coptic church, they consider the book of Enoch scriptural, and others they do not. There was no getting together and saying, oh, let's throw this book out, let's keep this book in. Didn't happen. And it says it condemned other Christian creeds such as Arianism as heresies of man-made. And so the main thing with that is Arian was saying that God was not, that Christ was God, but he was made. He wasn't of the same substance of God. That's what Nicaea was about. That's all it was about. So here it talks about the Edict of Milan. It says by 325, Arianism, a school of Christology which contended that Christ did not possess the divine essence of the Father, but was rather a primordial creation, an entity subordinate to God, became significantly widespread and controversies in the early church. However, the strife within the church not end with Nicaea. Nicene Creed formulation remained contentious even among anti-Arian churchmen. Constantine, while arguing tolerance, began to think that he had to come down on the wrong side and that the Nicaeans, with their fervid reciprocal persecutions of Arians, were actually perpetrating strife within the church. Constantine was not baptized until he was near death, and so forth. The point is the edict here. It says the edict was jointly issued and came after the Theodosius had been baptized by the bishop upon suffering severe illness in Thessalonica. So I can actually sort of read this, but my Latin's old. Latin's really rusty. It says, it is our desire that all the various nations which are subject to our clemency and moderation should continue to profess that religion which was delivered to the Romans by the divine apostle Peter, as it has been preserved by faith tradition, and which is now professed by the pontiff Damascus and by Peter, Bishop of Alexandria, a man of apostolic holiness, according to the apostolic teaching and the doctrines of the gospel. Let us believe in the one deity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, in equal majesty in the Holy Trinity. We authorize the following of this law to assume that the title of Catholic Christians, Catholic meaning universal, folks, but as for the others, since in our judgment they are foolish madmen, we decree that they shall be branded with the ignominious name of heretics. So what are we seeing here? Well, we're seeing the church getting involved with the state, much like they did with the media, or they have been with the media, and they have forever. And one of the things that they did was the churches then at the time were, again, satellite groups. They were independent. They were not under the Bishop of Rome, although the Bishop of Rome was continually consolidating power. What they would do is they would meet in homes. They would meet in some buildings if they weren't being persecuted at the time. And what Constantine and other emperors did in this era, in this age, is they said, we are going to make you all legitimate. We're going to put public works to your buildings. We're going to give you a stipend so you no longer have to take, not only vows of poverty, but support from the folks. Clement of Alexandria, living in the I believe the end of the 3rd century. I might be mistaken about the time. But in any case, Clement of Alexandria was a philosopher, a very well-learned man, had all kinds of books, sold every single one of them once he came to Christ because he knew that the true philosophy was the Logos. Christ, God himself, had come to the earth to save man from the clutches of death and sin, right? From the evil one who rules this world. And in doing so, he sold all of his books and then gave that money to the poor, spent most of his life in Alexandria after that being a teacher, and he lived only off of the money that his patrons provided to him. The church came in, the state came in, took matters into their own hands, as they always have over the centuries. Remember, in Roman culture, the church was always tied to the state. That's one of the reasons why Christians were persecuted, because they didn't worship idols like the rest. They were seen as atheists. But, that subsidy, it's pretty sweet. Makes life a little bit easier when you get these government funds to tell the truth. Suddenly the truth gets manipulated. In the universities, they don't necessarily get money for certain things if the government doesn't approve of their grants on what they're going to study. But you need to be aware of this. You need to be aware that we do these things and that there is influence there. And before I get out of here, I just want to remind you of the ministries of 1984. There was the ministry of love, the ministry of peace, and the ministry of plenty. Isn't that wonderful? The ministry of peace concerns itself with war. The ministry of truth with lies. The ministry of love with torture. And the ministry of plenty with starvation. These contradictions are not accidental, nor do they result from ordinary hypocrisy. They are deliberate exercises in doublethink, or what we often call today gaslighting. And a lot of what I do here, folks, again, I point you to things. I try to make it coherent, right? But it's a lot of me ranting, rambling. But what I'm trying to do here is paint this picture and this narrative to you of what you can trust. And I'm not telling you can't trust folks in the government. But how much are you going to trust somebody you've never met in your life who live thousands of miles away? Look, man, I'm like 60 miles from D.C., but a lot of you are much further. They live hundreds of thousands of miles away, like they have any real care about your life. Most of them are multimillionaires, highly influential. No, I don't trust that at all. What I trust is the folks I know. I trust God. I trust my wife, my daughter, my family. I trust my neighbor because I know them. You need to understand and wake up to the world, the real world, the true realities. Corruption abounds. We live in the kingdom of Satan. Anything so large and so powerful, they're not your friends. The media is not your friend. Donald Trump had the thing, enemy of the people. Well, I mean, he's not wrong. And it ain't anything new either, folks. This isn't new. But that's all I have for you all. Please go over to my locals, Rumble, Subscribestar, if you are so inclined to donate. PeerTube, all this stuff will be in the description. Go to the live show. Tomorrow we will be live. That is the Ends Justify the Memes. Every Wednesday, 7 p.m. We will be with our friend Don the Pleb. So guys, I'm going to be expanding as well to other things. Instagram will have my quick shots on it. I am going to start uploading to BitChute again. I don't really like BitChute, but I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it because free speech is so important. And I could go through a whole thing about how social media gets subsidized and whatever else from the government. And we all know, those of us who are liberty-minded, about the manipulation of these things. So guys, I hope you all enjoy. Please like, share, and subscribe. And with all that, this has been All Minus One. I wish you all well.